The Platte River ran cold and merciless that April morning, its swollen currents churning with snowmelt from the distant mountains. Catherine Hartwell felt the icy water fill her lungs as the current dragged her under for the third time. Her black morning dress, heavy with water, pulled her down like an anchor she'd been trying to cross at the shallow point, desperate to reach the trading post before nightfall, before her last coin was spent, and she had nothing left to trade but her wedding ring. The wagon accident that killed her husband 3 months ago had left her with nothing but debts and the clothes on her back. Today, she'd tried to ford the river to reach Cheyenne, where she hoped to find work. Any work. But the spring floods had made the crossing treacherous, and now the river was claiming what little life she had left. Before I continue with Catherine's rescue and her journey with the cowboy who saves her, I want to ask you something important. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It truly means the world to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. I'd also love to know, where are you listening from right now? Are you at home, on a commute, or perhaps relaxing after a long day? Now, back to Catherine's story. Strong hands gripped her arm just as darkness began to cloud her vision. She broke the surface, gasping and choking, as someone pulled her against the current with powerful strokes. Through her blurred vision, she saw a man's face, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes the color of storm clouds, focused intently on keeping her head above water. "I've got you," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Stop fighting, let me do the work." He pulled her to the bank with one arm, the other cutting through the water with practiced efficiency. When they reached the muddy shore, he hauled her up and onto solid ground, then knelt beside her as she coughed up river water, her body shaking violently. "Easy now," he said, turning her on her side. "Get it all out." When Catherine could finally breathe without choking, she looked up at her rescuer. He was perhaps 30, with broad shoulders that stretched his worn chambray shirt, dark hair plastered to his forehead, and eyes that held both wariness and something gentler, concern. "Thank you," she managed, through chattering teeth. Her fingers fumbled at her left hand, twisting off the thin gold band that had been her mother's before it was hers. "Please take this. It's all I have to—" His large, calloused hand closed gently over hers, stopping her. "Keep your ring, Mom. Gold isn't what you need right now. Warmth and shelter are." He stood, water streaming from his clothes, and whistled sharply. A magnificent paint horse trotted over from where it had been grazing. The man pulled a bedroll from behind his saddle and wrapped it around her shoulders before she could protest. "Can you ride?" he asked. I think so." Without ceremony, he lifted her onto the horse with surprising gentleness for a man his size, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, solid and warm, and she found herself leaning back against his chest as exhaustion claimed her. "Name's Cole Brennan," he said as the horse began moving. "I've got a ranch about 3 miles north. You can dry out there, get some hot food in you." "Catherine Hartwell," she whispered, "I'm sorry to be a burden." "You're not a burden." His voice rumbled through his chest against her back. "Though I'm curious what brought a lady out here alone, trying to cross a flooded river in a morning dress." Catherine closed her eyes. "I'm a widow. 3 months now. There was nothing left after the debts were settled. I was trying to reach Cheyenne before." She stopped, unable to voice how desperate her situation truly was. Cole's arm tightened slightly around her waist, protective, not possessive. "Before what?" "Before I had nothing left to trade but my dignity." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Cole spoke. His voice harder than before, but not unkind. "You won't need to trade anything at my ranch, Mrs. Hartwell. A woman's dignity isn't currency." His ranch appeared over a rise, a sturdy log house with a stone chimney, a large barn, and corrals holding several horses. It was modest, but well-maintained, the kind of place built by a man who worked with his own hands. Cole dismounted and lifted her down, and Catherine's legs nearly gave way. He steadied her with one hand on her elbow. "Can you walk?" "Yes, I just need a moment." But he was already guiding her toward the house, his hand still supporting her. Inside, the single large room was surprisingly neat. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, a sturdy table and chairs sat near the kitchen area, and a bed occupied the far corner, separated by a curtain that could be drawn for privacy. "Sit," Cole commanded, pulling a chair close to the fireplace. He began building up the fire with quick, efficient movements. "There's a screen in the corner there, and some clothes in that trunk that might fit you. They were my mother's. She passed 2 years ago." Catherine's throat tightened. "I couldn't. She'd want them worn rather than sitting unused." He kept his back to her, giving her privacy. "Change out of that wet dress before you catch your death. I'll make coffee." With numb fingers, Catherine moved behind the screen and peeled off the sodden black dress. In the trunk, she found a simple cotton dress in pale blue, soft from many washings. It was slightly too large, but she cinched it with a belt she found there. When she emerged, Cole had hung a pot of coffee over the fire and was slicing bread and cheese. "Better?" he asked without looking up. "Much. Thank you, Mr. Brennan." "Cole." He brought her a plate and a tin cup of coffee. "Drink that slow. Your stomach's probably still upset from the river water." She obeyed, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. As feeling returned to her fingers, she studied him more carefully. He moved with the grace of a man comfortable in his own body, despite his size. His hands were scarred and weathered from hard work, but his touch had been gentle. When he finally sat across from her, she noticed the fine lines around his eyes, laugh lines, or perhaps worry lines. "How long were you married?" he asked suddenly. 5 years. Edward was a good man, but unlucky. The wagon accident was just the final misfortune in a string of them." Cole nodded slowly. "And you've been alone since?" "I stayed with his brother's family for a time, but—" She stopped, remembering the way her brother-in-law had started looking at her. The way his wife's hospitality had turned cold. It wasn't appropriate to stay longer. "No family of your own?" "My parents passed when I was young. Edward was all I had." Cole stood abruptly and moved to the window, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the afternoon light. "I'm going to say something plainly, Mrs. Hartwell, because I'm not a man for pretty speeches. You can stay here. I need help with the house and the cooking. I'm passable at it, but barely. In exchange, you'll have shelter, food, and safety. Nothing more expected, nothing less offered." Catherine's heart hammered. "Mr. Brennan, I couldn't possibly—" "Cole," he corrected again, turning to face her. "And yes, you could. This ranch is doing well enough to support 2 people. I've got contracts to supply horses to the cavalry post, and I just brought in a new string from the wild herd up north. The work's honest, and so is my offer. People would talk. Let them." His storm-grey eyes met hers steadily. "I lost my wife 4 years ago. Cholera epidemic. Since then, I've had exactly 3 people suggest I needed to remarry for propriety's sake. And I sent all 3 packing. I don't care what people think, Mrs. Hartwell, do you?" Catherine thought about the alternative, arriving in Cheyenne with no money, no connections, desperate enough to accept whatever work she could find. She thought about her brother-in-law's wandering hands and his wife's accusing eyes. "I care about honest work for honest pay," she said finally. "If you're serious about this arrangement, I am. Then I accept, but please call me Catherine." Something that might have been a smile flickered across Cole's weathered face. "Catherine, then. Welcome to the Broken Creek Ranch." Over the following weeks, Catherine discovered that Cole Brennan was a man of few words, but consistent action. He rose before dawn to tend the horses, worked until dark, and expected the same work ethic from himself that he did from her. but he was never unkind, never demanding. When she burned the biscuits her first week, he ate them without complaint. When she struggled to master the massive cast-iron stove, he showed her the trick to controlling the temperature without making her feel foolish. In return, Catherine threw herself into making the house a home. She mended his worn shirts, planted a kitchen garden, and learned to make sourdough bread from the starter he'd been maintaining for years. She discovered he had a small library, mostly technical manuals on horse breeding and ranching, but also a few novels and a volume of Shakespeare that looked well read. "My mother's," he said when he caught her examining it. "She was a school teacher before she married my father, read to me every night when I was a boy." What was her favorite? The Tempest. She said she liked that it ended with forgiveness and new beginnings, not tragedy. Catherine ran her fingers over the worn cover. "Mine was Much Ado About Nothing. I loved how Beatrice refused to be diminished." Cole's eyes held hers for a long moment. "She would have liked you." The compliment, simple and sincere, warmed her more than she wanted to admit. As spring turned to early summer, Catherine found herself watching Cole work with the horses. He had a gift for it, a patience and understanding that gentled even the wildest mustangs. She watched him spend hours in the round pen with a particularly skittish mare, never raising his voice, never using force. Just steady, calm presence until the horse chose to trust him. "She was abused," he explained one evening when Catherine brought him water while he worked, "by her previous owner. Someone used a whip on her, probably tried to break her spirit." "But you're not breaking her," Catherine observed. "You're healing her." Cole's hand moved slowly along the mare's neck. "There's a difference between broken and trained. A broken horse has no spirit left. A trained horse chooses to trust. I want her trust, not her fear." The words resonated deep in Catherine's chest. She thought of Edward's occasional frustrations, the way he'd expected her to simply accept his decisions without question. She thought of her brother-in-law's entitled assumption that her grief made her available, and she looked at Cole, this quiet, powerful man who handled both horses and people with the same patient respect. "Do you see me as broken?" she asked suddenly. Cole turned to look at her fully, his grey eyes serious. "No, I see a woman who's been hurt but not broken. I see someone worth knowing, Catherine, not someone who needs fixing." Her breath caught at the intensity in his gaze. For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. Then one of the horses whinnied, breaking the spell, and Cole returned to his work. That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains, one of those violent early summer tempests that turned the sky green and brought hail the size of walnuts. Catherine was preparing dinner when the first cracks of thunder shook the house. Cole came in from securing the barn, his shirt soaked through despite his oilskin coat. "Big one," he said, stripping off the wet outer layer. "Could last through the night." Catherine tried not to stare at how his damp shirt clung to his chest and shoulders, outlining muscles built by years of physical labor. She turned back to the stove, stirring the stew more vigorously than necessary. Lightning struck somewhere close, and she jumped, the ladle clattering against the pot. "Easy," Cole said, and suddenly he was there, his hand warm on her shoulder. "We're safe inside. House has weathered worse than this." But Catherine couldn't stop the trembling that had nothing to do with fear of the storm and everything to do with his proximity. She could smell him, horse and leather and something uniquely masculine. "The wagon accident," she said quietly. "It happened during a storm like this. Edward was trying to get us to shelter. The lightning spooked the horses and they bolted. I jumped clear, but he—" She closed her eyes against the memory. "I watched it happen and couldn't do anything." Cole's other hand came up to her other shoulder, turning her gently to face him. "Catherine, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "You survived," he said firmly. That's what Edward would have wanted. You honored him by living, not by following him into death. A tear slipped down her cheek, and Cole's thumb caught it with surprising gentleness. For a moment they stood frozen, his large hand cupping her face, his eyes searching hers. "I should—" she started. "Stay," he said softly. Then, as if realizing what he'd said, he released her and stepped back. "I mean, dinner smells ready. Should we eat?" They ate in near silence, the tension between them as palpable as the electricity in the storm outside. When Catherine rose to clear the dishes, Cole stopped her with a hand on her wrist. "I need to tell you something," he said. "My wife Anna, when she died, I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone that close again. Losing her nearly destroyed me. I built walls, Catherine, high ones." Catherine's heart pounded. "Why are you telling me this?" Cole's grip on her wrist tightened slightly, not painfully but urgently. "Because those walls are cracking. Because when I pulled you from that river, something in me knew you were meant to be here. Because every day I watch you bring life back to this house, and I'm terrified of what that means." "Cole, let me finish." He stood, still holding her wrist, his grey eyes intense. "I'm not a romantic man. I can't offer you poetry or fancy words, but I can offer you honesty. You've become important to me, Catherine. More than just a housekeeper, more than I ever intended." Catherine's free hand came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palm. "I'm afraid too," she whispered. "I'm afraid of wanting something again, afraid of losing it. Edward's death taught me that nothing is guaranteed." "No," Cole agreed. "Nothing is, but fear isn't living. It's just slower dying." The truth of his words struck her like lightning. She'd been so focused on not being hurt again that she'd forgotten what it felt like to truly live, to want, to hope. Thunder cracked overhead, and in that moment of sound and fury, Catherine made her choice. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. Cole went still for a heartbeat, then his arms came around her, pulling her against his solid chest. The kiss was tentative at first, both of them testing, learning. Then it deepened, became something hungry and needful. His hand tangled in her hair, tilted her head back, and she gasped against his mouth. "God, Catherine," he breathed against her lips, "if we don't stop now—" "Then don't stop," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. But Cole did stop, pulling back enough to look at her. "I won't have you regret this. I won't have you think I expected this in exchange for shelter." Catherine framed his face with both hands, forcing him to hold her gaze. "I know the difference between obligation and choice, Cole Brennan. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you." Something fierce and tender flared in his eyes. He lifted her effortlessly and carried her to his bed. Their bed now, she realized. He set her down gently and knelt beside the bed, his hands on her knees. "Tell me if you want to stop," he said. "Any time. I mean that." "I know you do," she said, touching his face. "That's why I trust you." He undressed her slowly, reverently, his calloused hands gentle on her skin. When she reached for his shirt buttons, her fingers trembled. "Go slow," she whispered. "It's been a long time, and Edward was never. That is, he was kind, but not particularly." Cole's hands covered hers. "I'll die before I hurt you, Catherine. We go at your pace, always." And he kept that promise. Every touch was careful, deliberate. He mapped her body like terrain worth knowing, found places that made her gasp and sigh. When she tensed, he paused. When she pulled him closer, he obliged. He made her feel precious and powerful all at once. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the storm raging outside while peace settled inside. Catherine traced the scars on Cole's chest, a long one along his ribs, another across his shoulder. "Wild horse kicked me when I was 19, he said of the first. "Didn't respect her space. She taught me better. And this one? Knife fight in a saloon, before I learned that walking away was braver than standing and fighting. Catherine kissed the shoulder scar gently. You're full of hard-won wisdom. That's a kind way of saying I've been a fool enough times to learn better. He pulled her closer, his chin resting on top of her head. But I'm not fool enough to let you go, Catherine. Not now that I've found you. Stay with me, she whispered, the words spontaneous and true. Here, now, not thinking about tomorrow or yesterday. Just be here with me. Nicole tightened his arms around her. Here, now, he repeated, for tonight and every night you'll have me. Then I'll have you forever, she said. They fell asleep to the sound of rain on the roof, two wounded souls finding healing in each other's arms. But peace, Catherine learned over the next weeks, was a fragile thing in the untamed West. She and Cole settled into a new rhythm, working together during the day, coming together at night. He taught her to ride well enough to help move the horses between pastures. She taught him that reading aloud in the evenings was a pleasure worth making time for. They were careful in town, maintaining propriety for appearance's sake, but at the ranch, they were simply Cole and Catherine, partners in work and life. Then, on a sweltering July afternoon, Catherine's past arrived at Broken Creek Ranch in the form of her brother-in-law, Thomas Hartwell, and two men she didn't recognize. She was hanging laundry when they rode up. The moment she saw Thomas's face, something cold slithered down her spine. Catherine, Thomas said, dismounting. He was a smaller, meaner version of Edward. Same brown hair and sharp features, but with calculating eyes. I've been looking for you. Thomas. She kept her voice neutral, aware of Cole working in the barn behind her. What brings you out here? Family concern. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You disappeared without a word. Martha was beside herself with worry. I sent a letter explaining my departure. A letter saying you'd found work. Thomas's gaze swept the ranch dismissively. I didn't realize you'd found such intimate work. Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Cole emerged from the barn. He moved with deceptive casualness, but Catherine recognized the tension in his shoulders. Something I can help you with? Cole asked, his voice pleasant but his eyes hard. Thomas looked Cole up and down, clearly trying to assess whether he was a threat. Thomas Hartwell. This woman is my sister-in-law. I've come to take her home. Mrs. Hartwell is employed here, Cole said calmly, unless she says otherwise. Is that what we're calling it? Thomas sneered. Employment. Everyone in town knows she's living here, a widow, alone with a man, no chaperone. It's unseemly. What's unseemly? Cole said, his voice dropping dangerously low. Is a man riding onto another man's property and making accusations. Mrs. Hartwell is under my protection. If she wants to leave, she can, but she'll make that choice herself. The two men with Thomas shifted in their saddles, hands drifting toward their guns. Catherine's heart raced. Actually, Thomas said, pulling a paper from his coat, my brother left debts, substantial ones. As his widow, Catherine is responsible for those debts. I've purchased them from the creditors, which means she owes me approximately $800. Catherine's blood ran cold. That's impossible. The lawyer said Edward's debts were settled by selling everything you owned. These are separate debts, gambling debts, from before he married you. Thomas's smile was cruel. I'm prepared to forgive the debts if Catherine returns to live under my care. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to demand payment. Cole stepped forward, putting himself between Catherine and Thomas. How convenient finding these debts now, almost like you invented them. Thomas's expression hardened. Call me a liar again and we'll settle this differently. Then let's settle it differently, Cole said flatly. You and me, fists, knives or guns, your choice. You win, you can try to collect your dubious debts. I win, you ride off and never bother Catherine again. Cole, no. Catherine grabbed his arm. But Thomas was already smiling. "I don't settle business disputes with brawling, Brennan. I settle them in court. And when the judge orders Catherine to pay what she owes, she'll have two choices: jail or coming with me." He mounted his horse. "I'll give you 3 days to gather the money, Catherine. Otherwise, I'll be back with the sheriff." They rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving Catherine shaking with fury and fear. "He's lying," she said. "Edward didn't gamble. He barely drank." "I know." Cole's jaw was tight. "But proving it will take time. We might not have. $800. Catherine knew what he was thinking. $800 was a fortune, more than most ranchers made in a year. "You can't pay it, Cole. I won't let you bankrupt yourself for you." He turned to face her, cupping her face in both hands. "Catherine, I'd give everything I own to keep you safe. But it's not right. These aren't real debts." "Probably not, but Thomas clearly has some kind of documentation, whether forged or not, and judges tend to side with family in these matters." Cole's thumb stroked her cheek. "We'll figure something out, together." But lying awake that night, wrapped in Cole's arms, Catherine couldn't see a solution. Even if they fought the debts in court, legal fees would be substantial. And if Thomas really had purchased gambling markers, real or forged, the law would be on his side. The next morning, Cole rode out early. When he returned at noon, he had a determined look on his face. "I talked to some men I know," he said. "There's a wild horse herd up in the mountain valley, maybe 40 head. The cavalry is paying premium prices for trained mounts right now. If I can bring in that herd and break the best of them in 3 days, I can make the money to pay off Thomas." 3 days? Catherine's heart sank. "Cole, that's impossible. You can't catch and train 40 horses in 3 days. Not 40, 10. The best 10 would bring in about $1,000 trained. It's enough." "It's too dangerous." Catherine gripped his arm. "Those mountain herds are wild. You could be killed trying to catch them, let alone break them." Cole kissed her forehead. "I've been doing this since I was 15. I know the risks." "Then let me help." "Catherine, I can ride now. I can handle a rope. You've taught me." She squared her shoulders. "I won't sit here uselessly while you risk your life for me. We do this together, or not at all." Cole studied her face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Together, then, but you follow my lead. These aren't the half-tame horses in our corrals. These are wild animals, and they're dangerous." They packed supplies and rode out that afternoon, following trails that climbed higher into the mountains. Cole moved with confidence through terrain that would have terrified Catherine months ago, but she'd learned from him. How to read the land, how to trust her horse, how to keep moving even when afraid. They made camp that evening in a small valley, and Cole pointed out the herd grazing about a half-mile away. Magnificent creatures, their coats gleaming in the fading light. "The big paint stallion leads them," Cole explained. "He's too old and too smart to be caught, but there are younger horses, 2- and 3-year-olds, that will train up well. How do we catch them? Tomorrow. We'll build a natural corral using that narrow canyon entrance. Then I'll cut the 10 best young horses from the herd and drive them in. You'll guard the entrance once they're inside. And then? Then the hard work begins." That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. She lay beside Cole, watching the stars through the pine branches, and felt the weight of how much he was risking for her. "Cole," she whispered, "if something happens to you, nothing's going to happen. But if it does, if you're hurt or—" He rolled to face her, his eyes catching the firelight. "Then you take whatever money is in the ranch account and you run. Go to California, start fresh. Don't let Thomas use this against you. I won't leave you." "Catherine." "No." She pressed her fingers to his lips. "I ran once, from my brother-in-law. I crossed that river trying to run from my problems. I'm done running. Whatever happens, we face it together." Cole caught her hand and kissed her palm. "You're either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both." He pulled her close, and they made love under the stars, each touch desperate and tender, as if trying to memorize each other against an uncertain future. The next day dawned clear and hot. They worked through the morning, using ropes and brush to create a barrier across the canyon entrance. Cole explained that the horses would naturally run uphill when spooked, and the canyon would funnel them toward their trap. By midday, they were ready. Cole mounted up, and Catherine positioned herself near the canyon entrance, a long pole in her hands to close the gap once the horses were inside. "Be ready," Cole said. "When they come, they'll come fast." He rode off, circling wide around the herd. Catherine watched, her heart in her throat, as he gradually moved closer to the grazing horses. The big paint stallion raised his head, alert. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Cole let out a piercing whistle and charged directly at the herd. Chaos erupted. The horses bolted, the stallion leading them straight toward the mountains and toward Catherine's canyon. The ground shook with the thunder of hooves. Cole rode hard on their heels, guiding them, pushing them toward the narrow opening. Catherine's hands tightened on the pole. Closer, closer. The lead horses entered the canyon, panicked and running. She counted 5, 6, 7, still not enough. The paint stallion suddenly wheeled, trying to turn the herd away from the trap. But Cole was there, cutting him off, driving 3 more young horses into the canyon, 10 total. "Now!" Cole shouted. Catherine swung the pole and brush barrier into place, securing it quickly. The horses inside the canyon wheeled and bucked, searching for escape, but the walls were too high and the entrance blocked. Cole rode up, breathing hard, his face split with a triumphant grin. "We did it!" Catherine wanted to celebrate, but one look at the terrified horses told her the hard part was just beginning. Over the next 2 days, Cole worked magic. He moved among the trapped horses with patience and skill, slowly separating the most promising ones, getting them used to his presence. He never used force, never rushed, just steady, consistent pressure and release until each horse began to understand that he wasn't a threat. Catherine helped where she could, bringing water, holding ropes, murmuring softly to the frightened animals. She watched Cole work a particularly skittish bay gelding, spending hours just standing near it until the horse's panic subsided into wary acceptance. "You're not trying to break him," she observed as she'd said before. "Never," Cole confirmed. "I'm showing him that trusting humans is safe, that I respect his nature while asking for his cooperation." On the 3rd day, Cole began the actual training, getting halters on, teaching the horses to lead, introducing the saddle. It was dangerous work. One black mare kicked him hard enough to leave a bruise the size of a dinner plate on his thigh. A roan colt reared and nearly struck him with its hooves. But by sunset of the 3rd day, Cole had 10 horses that would lead on a rope and tolerate a saddle. They weren't fully trained, that would take weeks, but they were calm enough to move to the ranch and continue their education there. They drove the horses down from the mountains, arriving at Broken Creek Ranch just as the sun was setting on the 3rd day. Thomas Hartwell was waiting, the same 2 men flanking him, but this time the sheriff was with them too. "Well, well," Thomas said, looking at the horses. "Quite an effort, but I'm afraid it's not enough. The judge has ruled that my claim is valid. Catherine, you're coming with me." "Actually," Cole said calmly, dismounting, "we have your money." He pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag and tossed it to the sheriff. $850. I stopped by the cavalry post on the way down. They were happy to buy these horses sight unseen, based on my reputation, paid in advance. The sheriff opened the pouch and counted the money slowly. Finally, he nodded. "It's all here." Thomas's face darkened. "That doesn't change anything. Catherine still is a free woman who's paid her debts," the sheriff interrupted, "which means your business here is done, Hartwell. Time to move along." "This isn't over," Thomas hissed at Catherine. You're a disgrace to my brother's memory, living in sin with this—" "Careful," Cole said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. "You've gotten your money. Don't press your luck." The sheriff put a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Come on, Hartwell, let it go." They watched the four men ride away. When they were finally out of sight, Catherine's legs gave out. Cole caught her, pulling her against his chest. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe. You're free." Catherine clung to him, trembling with relief. "You sold your horses, the ones you spent months catching and training. I'll catch more, horses I can replace. You?" He tilted her face up to his. "You're irreplaceable." That night, exhausted and filthy from days in the mountains, they collapsed into bed together. But before sleep claimed them, Catherine propped herself up on one elbow and looked down at Cole. "Marry me," she said. Cole's eyes widened. "What?" "Marry me. I know it's unconventional," the woman asking. "I know we haven't courted properly or followed any of society's rules. But I don't care about rules anymore. I care about you. I care about building a life here together. So marry me, Cole Brennan." A slow smile spread across his weathered face. "You sure you want to tie yourself to a horse rancher who owns more debt than assets and lives too far from town? I've never been more sure of anything." Cole pulled her down for a deep kiss. "Then yes, Catherine Hartwell, I'll marry you. Though technically, I should have asked you first. We've never done anything the traditional way. Why start now?" They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in town. Catherine wore a simple dress she'd sewn herself in pale yellow, a color of sunshine and new beginnings, not the black of mourning. Cole wore his best shirt and a string tie, and looked uncomfortable but determined. The ceremony was small, just a few neighbors and the ranch hands Cole occasionally employed. When the minister asked if anyone objected, there was a tense moment where Catherine half expected Thomas to appear. But the doors remained closed, and they spoke their vows without interruption. "I promise to respect you," Cole said, holding both her hands. "To work beside you, not above you, to see you as a partner, not property, to love you when things are easy and stand beside you when they're hard." Catherine blinked back tears. "I promise to build this life with you, to be brave when I'm afraid, to trust you with my heart, even though I know it's a risk, to love you, Cole Brennan, for all the days we have together." When the minister pronounced them married and told Cole he could kiss his bride, Cole pulled Catherine close and kissed her with a thoroughness that made several people clear their throats awkwardly. Catherine didn't care. She kissed him back, pouring 4 months of fear and hope and love into that kiss. They rode back to Broken Creek Ranch as husband and wife, and that night they celebrated their marriage properly. But afterward, lying in the darkness with Cole's arm heavy and warm around her waist, Catherine felt a profound sense of peace. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she whispered. "After Edward died, I thought my life was over, that I'd never be anything but a widow, defined by loss." Cole's hand spread across her stomach, warm and possessive. "And now? Now I'm Catherine Brennan, wife, rancher, partner. I'm not running from the past anymore. I'm building a future." "Our future," Cole corrected. "Our future," Catherine agreed. The months that followed weren't easy. Ranch life never was. There were droughts and storms, difficult foalings and sick cattle. Money was often tight. But through it all, Catherine and Cole worked side by side, their partnership deepening with each challenge they faced together. Catherine learned to break horses under Cole's patient tutelage, discovering she had a gift for working with the fearful ones, perhaps because she understood their trauma. Cole learned that having a partner meant sharing not just the work, but the decisions, and that Catherine's judgment was as sound as his own. A year after their wedding, as autumn painted the mountains gold and red, Catherine stood in the barn watching Cole work with a new foal. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, where their first child grew. Cole looked up and caught her watching, and the smile that crossed his face was pure joy. "Thinking about something?" he asked, walking over to rest his hand over hers on her stomach. "Just remembering a morning last spring when I was drowning in that river, certain my life was over." Cole's hand tightened, and instead, you pulled me out. You saved me, Cole, not just from the river, but from giving up on myself. He kissed her forehead gently. "You saved yourself, Catherine. I just gave you a safe place to land while you did it. You're the strongest woman I know." "We saved each other," Catherine corrected. "You were drowning too, in grief and loneliness. We both needed to be pulled back to life." Cole wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder, both their hands on her belly. "Here, now," he murmured, echoing the words she'd spoken that stormy night. "This is where we belong, together." "Here now," Catherine agreed, "and always." As the sun set over Broken Creek Ranch, Catherine Brennan, formerly Hartwell, formerly drowning, formerly lost, stood in the arms of the man she loved and felt completely, perfectly found. The past had brought her to this moment, but it no longer defined her. She was no longer running from anything. She was home. Epilogue. 5 years later, Catherine Brennan stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, watching her 3-year-old daughter chase chickens while her husband taught their 6-year-old son to rope a fence post. The Broken Creek Ranch had prospered. They'd added cattle to complement the horse breeding, and Cole's reputation for training quality mounts had spread throughout the territory. But more than the material success, Catherine treasured the life they'd built. Her children would grow up knowing they were loved unconditionally. They would see their mother as a partner to their father, not a subordinate. They would learn that strength came in many forms, and that the courage to trust again after being hurt was perhaps the greatest strength of all. Cole looked up from showing their son the proper wrist motion and caught her eye. Even after all these years, that look still made her breath catch. Love and respect and desire all tangled together. Their son managed a successful throw, and Cole whooped with pride. Their daughter abandoned the chickens to run to her father, demanding he teach her too. Cole scooped her up, laughing, and Catherine's heart felt so full it might burst. She thought about that desperate woman in the river, fighting the current, certain she was drowning. That woman had been so focused on survival that she'd forgotten how to live. It had taken a gray-eyed cowboy with gentle hands and honest words to remind her that surviving wasn't the same as living, and that trusting again was worth the risk. Catherine walked down the porch steps to join her family, and Cole's arm came around her waist naturally, pulling her into their circle. This was what she'd found when she stopped running. Not just love, but home. Not just safety, but partnership. Not just survival, but life in its fullest, messiest, most beautiful form. "Stay with me," she whispered to Cole, echoing that stormy night years ago. "Here, now." He kissed the top of her head, understanding as he always did. "Here, now, and always. I'm not going anywhere, Catherine. This is where I belong, with you." And it was true. They had found their place, not despite their wounds, but because of them. Two people who'd been broken by loss had found each other and built something unbreakable together. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth every challenge. Here, now, and always. Together. The winter of their 6th year together arrived with unprecedented fury. Snow fell for 3 days straight, burying the ranch under drifts that reached the windows. Cole and their ranch hand, Miguel, worked around the clock to keep paths cleared to the barn and ensure the livestock had food and water. Catherine stood at the kitchen window, watching Cole emerge from the barn, snow crusting his beard and eyebrows. Even after all these years, the sight of him made her heart skip. He'd grown more weathered with time, the lines around his eyes deeper, but he moved with the same confident grace that had captivated her that first day. "Mama, is Papa coming in?" 7-year-old James pressed against her side, peering out the window. "Soon, sweetheart. He's making sure the horses are settled." 4-year-old Sarah tugged on Catherine's skirt. "Can we make Papa hot cocoa?" "That's a wonderful idea." They were preparing the cocoa when Cole stamped into the house, bringing a blast of frigid air with him. He stripped off his snow-covered coat and boots, and both children rushed to hug him. "Careful, I'm freezing," he warned, but pulled them close anyway, kissing the tops of their heads. Catherine handed him a steaming cup, and their fingers brushed in the familiar gesture. Even that small touch sent warmth through her. "How bad is it?" she asked quietly, while the children played near the fire. "Bad. We've lost 2 calves already, froze before we could get them to shelter. The feed's holding out, but if this keeps up another week, we'll be in trouble." He sipped the cocoa, sighing with relief. "Miguel's staying in the barn tonight. Someone needs to check on the animals every few hours. Then you need rest while you can." That night, after the children were asleep, Catherine and Cole lay in bed listening to the wind howl. His arm was around her, her head on his chest, their legs tangled together in the familiar way of long-time lovers. "I'm worried," Cole admitted quietly. "This winter could break us financially. We're burning through feed faster than expected, and if we lose more livestock—" Catherine propped herself up to look at him. "We've survived worse. Remember the drought 3 years ago? We got through that together. That was different. This is—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "I need to tell you something. The bank note on the North pasture is due in March. I thought we'd have enough from the horse sales, but with this winter, buyers aren't coming. If we can't make that payment—" Catherine's stomach tightened. "How much do we need?" $1,200. It was an enormous sum. Catherine's mind raced through possibilities. We could sell some of the breeding stock. Not in this weather. No one's traveling to buy horses. Cole pulled her close again, his voice rough. "I'm sorry, Catherine. I should have told you sooner. I kept thinking I'd find a solution before—" "Before what? Before you had to worry your wife?" Catherine's voice was firm but not angry. "Cole Brennan, we're partners. That means sharing the burdens, not you carrying them alone." He kissed her forehead. "Old habits. I spent so many years alone before you." "Well, you're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out. Together." But as the storm continued and February arrived with no break in the weather, solutions seemed increasingly distant. Catherine began taking inventory of everything they owned that could be sold. Her mother's silver brush and mirror set. The few pieces of jewelry Cole had given her. It wouldn't be enough, but it was something. One morning, she was in the barn helping Cole muck stalls when Miguel burst in, snow swirling around him. "Senor Cole, there's a man at the house. He says he's from the bank." Cole's face went still. "Already? The note isn't due for another 6 weeks." They hurried to the house, where a thin man in a city suit stood near the fire, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Catherine positioned the children in their bedroom with instructions to stay put, then joined Cole in facing their visitor. "Mr. Brennan, Mrs. Brennan," the banker said, clutching his hat. "I'm Harold Simmons from the Territorial Bank in Cheyenne. I apologize for the timing, but I'm here about your loan." "It's not due until March 15th, Cole said flatly. "Yes, well." Simmons cleared his throat. "The bank has been purchased by new owners out of Chicago. They're calling in all outstanding agricultural loans immediately. I'm afraid I need payment in full within 30 days, or the bank will foreclose on the property secured by the loan." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. 30 days. In the middle of winter, with no way to sell livestock or horses, they needed to come up with $1,200 in 30 days. "That's not legal," Cole said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We have a contract." There's a clause allowing the bank to call the loan if ownership changes. I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan, truly. I tried to argue against it, but the new owners are ruthless. They're doing this to dozens of ranchers across the territory. Simmons shifted uncomfortably. There may be one option. A Mr. Thomas Hartwell has offered to purchase several of the defaulted properties. He's expressed particular interest in yours. Perhaps you could negotiate directly with him. Catherine's hands clenched into fists. Thomas Hartwell, my former brother-in-law. Understanding dawned on Simmons's face. Ah, I see. Then you understand this may be complicated. After Simmons left, Cole stood at the window, his shoulders rigid with tension. Catherine came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her cheek against his back. He's been planning this, Cole said. Hartwell, somehow he knew the bank was being sold, positioned himself to buy up the foreclosed properties. He's been waiting all these years for a chance to take everything from us. He won't, Catherine said fiercely. I won't let him. Cole turned in her arms, his grey eyes stormy. Catherine, I don't see how we can stop him. We can't raise that kind of money in 30 days, not in winter. But Catherine's mind was already racing. An idea was forming, desperate, perhaps foolish, but their only real chance. The Denver mining operation, she said. The one that wanted to contract with us last year for pack horses. You said they'd pay premium prices for horses that could handle mountain terrain. That was before winter. The passes are closed. Not all of them. The southern route through Raton Pass stays open most winters. It's dangerous, but passable. Catherine gripped his arms. We take our 20 best horses to Denver, sell them for whatever we can get. It might not be the full 1,200, but it could be close. Cole shook his head. Catherine, it's a 10-day journey in good weather. In winter through mountain passes, it could take 3 weeks if we make it at all. And that's assuming I can even find buyers once I get there. Then we make it work. We don't have another choice. I can't leave you and the children alone for that long. If something happened, Miguel will be here. And I'm not the helpless woman you pulled from that river anymore, Cole. I can handle the ranch for a few weeks. She cupped his face in her hands. But more importantly, I'm not sending you alone. We go together. Absolutely not. The children can stay with Sarah Mitchell in town. She's been asking to help, and she loves the children. This way, they'll be safe and warm while we're gone. Catherine's voice was steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. You taught me that partners face things together. This is me being your partner, Cole. He searched her eyes for a long moment. It's too dangerous. So is losing everything we've built. So is letting Thomas Hartwell win. She pressed closer to him. You told me once that fear is just slower dying. I'm not afraid of hard things anymore. I'm afraid of not trying. Cole pulled her into a fierce embrace. You're either the bravest woman I've ever known or the most stubborn. Both, Catherine said against his chest. Definitely both. 2 days later, they set out for Denver with 20 horses, leaving James and Sarah with Sarah Mitchell and her daughters. The children had been upset, but Catherine had knelt before them and explained with simple honesty, Papa and I need to take a trip to save our ranch. Mrs. Mitchell will take wonderful care of you. We'll be back as soon as we can. Promise? Sarah had asked, her lower lip trembling. Catherine had pulled both children close. I promise. Your papa and I have survived too much to let a little snow stop us now. The journey was brutal from the start. The cold was bone-deep and relentless. They travelled from first light until dark, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. At night, they huddled together in their tent, using their combined body heat to stay warm. On the 4th day, they reached the approach to Raton Pass. The narrow trail climbed steeply between towering rock walls, and the wind funneled through with punishing force. The horses balked, sensing danger. We can turn back, Cole said, though his voice suggested he already knew her answer. Forward, oh, Catherine said, always forward. They led the horses single file through the pass. Snow began falling again, thick and blinding. Catherine could barely see Cole ahead of her, could only follow the dark shape of him and trust he knew the way. Then, without warning, she heard a crack like a rifle shot. The ground beneath her feet shifted. "Avalanche!" Cole shouted. "Run!" Catherine ran, pulling her horse and the string of 3 animals tied behind it. The rumble grew louder, and she could feel the vibration through her boots. Snow and ice cascaded down the slope above them, a white wall of death. Cole grabbed her arm, yanking her and the horses into a narrow cut in the rock wall. They pressed back as far as they could, the horses screaming in terror as the avalanche thundered past the opening. Snow filled the air so thick Catherine couldn't breathe, couldn't see, could only hold onto Cole's arm and pray. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. Silence fell, broken only by their ragged breathing and the nervous snorting of the horses. "Are you hurt?" Cole's hands ran over her, checking for injuries. "I'm fine." The horses, they counted quickly. 18. 2 of the animals in the rear had been swept away by the avalanche. Catherine felt tears freeze on her cheeks, not for the financial loss, though that was significant, but for the animals themselves. Cole's arm came around her shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "They didn't suffer. It was quick." Catherine wiped her face. "We keep moving. 18 horses will have to be enough." They emerged from the pass 2 days later, battered and exhausted but alive. Denver sprawled below them, a growing city of brick buildings and muddy streets. Cole had contacts at the mining company, and they made their way there immediately. The negotiations were tense. The mine foreman recognized the quality of Cole's horses but knew they were desperate. He offered $800 for all 18 horses. "They're worth twice that," Cole said, his voice hard. "Maybe in spring, but it's winter and you need money now. 800, take it or leave it." Catherine stepped forward before Cole could respond. 1,200, she said calmly. "These horses are trained for mountain terrain. They're sound, healthy, and exactly what you need for your operation. We both know you can't find better animals anywhere else right now." The foreman's eyes narrowed. "Lady, I just made you a generous offer." "You made us an insulting offer." Catherine held his gaze. "These horses will save your men's lives on dangerous trails. They'll work for years. They're worth $1,200, and we both know it. The question is whether you're too cheap to pay fair value." The foreman's face reddened. Cole tensed beside her, but Catherine didn't back down. Finally, the foreman smiled grudgingly. "You've got steel in your spine, Mrs. Brennan. All right. 1,100, and that's my final offer." Catherine glanced at Cole, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. 1,100, she agreed. "Cash, now." 20 minutes later, they walked out of the mining office with $1,100 in a money belt strapped around Cole's waist. It was 100 short of what they needed, but it was close. That night, in a boarding house room, they collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, too exhausted to even undress. But as Catherine lay beside Cole, feeling the warmth of him, the solid reality of his presence, she felt a surge of pride. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it," Cole corrected. "That foreman would have held at 800 if you hadn't pushed. I learned from the best." She rolled to face him, cupping his bearded cheek. "You taught me my own worth, Cole. You taught me I don't have to accept less than I deserve." He kissed her palm. "I'm so damn proud of you, Catherine Brennan." They made love that night, with a desperate intensity born of relief and lingering fear. Afterward, Catherine traced the new scar on Cole's shoulder, a souvenir from a fallen branch during the avalanche. "We still need $100, she said quietly. "I know. I've been thinking about that." Cole was silent for a moment. "I could sell my father's pocket watch. It's gold, probably worth $50 or $60, and there's the rifle my mother gave me. It's a quality piece." "No." Catherine sat up. "Those are your family heirlooms. We'll find another way." "Catherine, we're out of options and out of time." She was quiet, thinking. Then, "My grandmother's ruby ring. The one Edward gave me when we married. It was his grandmother's originally. It's a good stone. With your father's watch, it might be enough." Cole sat up too, taking her hands. "Are you sure? That ring is just a thing. This ranch, our life, our children's future. That's what matters. Edward would understand. He'd want me to do whatever necessary to protect our family." She squeezed his hands. "Besides, I have something much more valuable than a ruby ring." "What's that?" "You, us, what we've built together." She leaned in to kiss him softly. "A ring is just gold and stone. What we have is real." The next morning, they visited a jeweler who paid them $75 for the ring and $50 for the watch. Combined with the money from the horses, they now had $1,225, enough to pay the loan with a small cushion. They made the journey home in record time, driven by eagerness to see their children and secure the ranch. When they finally rode up to the Broken Creek Ranch, Miguel rushed out to greet them, relief evident on his weathered face. "Gracias a Dios, I was starting to worry." "The children?" Catherine asked immediately. "Safe and happy with Senora Mitchell in town. I checked on them twice." The next day, Cole and Catherine rode into Cheyenne together. They walked into the Territorial Bank and placed $1,200 on Harold Simmons's desk. "Full payment," Cole said, 3 days early." Simmons counted it carefully, then stamped a paper and handed it to them. "Paid in full. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Brennan. Not many people could have managed this." As they walked out of the bank, Catherine saw a familiar figure across the street. Thomas Hartwell stood beside an expensive buggy, staring at them with undisguised fury. He'd been so certain they would fail, so sure he'd finally get his revenge. Catherine met his gaze steadily, then deliberately took Cole's hand and raised it to her lips, kissing his knuckles. The gesture was clear. "You've lost. We're stronger than you. We always will be." Thomas's face contorted with rage, but there was nothing he could do. He climbed into his buggy and drove away, and Catherine knew they'd seen the last of him. That evening, with James and Sarah safely home and tucked into bed, Catherine and Cole sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge. The storm had finally broken, and the night was clear and cold and beautiful. "We almost lost everything," Cole said quietly. "But we didn't. We fought, and we won." Catherine leaned against his shoulder. "Do you ever regret pulling me from that river? Your life would be simpler without me." Cole's arm tightened around her. "Simpler may be, but it wouldn't be life. You taught me that surviving isn't the same as living, Catherine. Before you, I was just surviving. Now?" He turned to look at her, his grey eyes reflecting starlight. "Now I'm living, really living, and I wouldn't trade that for anything." Catherine kissed him, pouring 6 years of love and trust and partnership into that kiss. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Here, now," she whispered. "Here, now, and always," Cole responded. "Together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, two people who had learned that the strongest foundations were built not on certainty, but on trust, not on avoiding storms, but on weathering them together, not on never falling, but on always helping each other rise. The ranch was safe, their family was whole, and tomorrow would bring new challenges as it always did. But tonight, here, now, they were together, and that was enough. It was everything. 7 years into their marriage, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. The news came as a surprise. Sarah was now 5, and they'd assumed their family was complete. But as spring arrived at Broken Creek Ranch, so did the unmistakable signs of new life. She told Cole one evening after the children were asleep. He'd been reviewing the account books at the kitchen table, and she came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. Cole set down his pencil and turned to face her, concern flickering in his eyes. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant. About 3 months along, I think." For a moment, Cole simply stared. Then a slow smile spread across his face, that rare, unguarded smile that still made Catherine's heart skip. He stood and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her once before setting her down gently. "Catherine, another child." His large hand spread across her still flat stomach. "Are you happy about it?" "Terrified," she admitted, "and thrilled, both at once." "I remember that feeling." He kissed her forehead, then her lips. "We'll manage. We always do." But managing became complicated when 2 weeks later, Miguel announced he was leaving. His elderly mother in Santa Fe was ill, and he needed to return to care for her. "I'm sorry, Senor Cole," he said, hat in hand. "You have been good to me, but my mother, she has no one else." "I understand," Cole said, though Catherine could see the tension in his shoulders. Family comes first, always. After Miguel left, the workload doubled. Cole was up before dawn and worked past dark, trying to manage the ranch alone. Catherine helped where she could, but the pregnancy was difficult. She was sick most mornings and exhausted by afternoon. James, at 8 years old, tried to help his father, but he was still too young for the heavy work. One afternoon, Catherine was hanging laundry when she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. She gasped, doubling over, and the basket fell from her hands. Sarah came running from where she'd been playing. "Mama, Mama, what's wrong?" "Go get Papa," Catherine managed. "Fast!" Cole came sprinting from the barn, his face pale. He lifted Catherine carefully and carried her into the house, setting her on the bed. "Tell me what hurts," he demanded. "My stomach, sharp pain, on the right side." Catherine gripped his hand as another wave of pain hit. "Cole, the baby." "Shh, let me check." His hands were gentle but thorough as he examined her. When he pressed lightly on her lower right abdomen, she cried out. Cole's jaw tightened. "James, ride to town and fetch Dr. Patterson. Tell him your mother needs him urgently. Can you do that?" "Yes, Papa." James was already running for the door. "Sarah, sweetheart, go to your room and play quietly. Your mama will be fine." After the children were occupied, Cole sat on the edge of the bed and took Catherine's hand. "The baby." "I don't know," Catherine whispered, fear clawing at her throat. "Please, God, don't let me lose this baby." "Doctor?" Patterson arrived 2 hours later, 2 hours during which Catherine lay still, trying not to move, trying not to cry, while Cole sat beside her and held her hand in silence. There was nothing to say. They could only wait. The doctor's examination was thorough but inconclusive. "Could be a threatened miscarriage," he said finally. "Or it could be something else. Mrs. Brennan, you need complete bed rest. No work, no lifting, minimal movement for at least a month. Then we'll reevaluate." After the doctor left, Catherine looked at Cole helplessly. "A month? Cole, we can't afford for me to be in bed for a month. There's too much work." "We'll manage," Cole said firmly, but she could see the worry in his eyes. The next 2 weeks were grueling. Cole worked himself to exhaustion, trying to manage everything. James and Sarah did what they could, but they were children. The house grew cluttered, meals became simpler, and Catherine lay in bed, feeling useless and guilty. On the 15th day, she woke to find Cole hadn't come to bed. She rose carefully, the pain had subsided some, and found him asleep at the kitchen table, his head pillowed on his arms, surrounded by dirty dishes and paperwork. Catherine's heart ached. This strong, proud man who had saved her, who had partnered with her through every challenge, was being slowly ground down by circumstances beyond his control. She made a decision. The next morning, after Cole left for the barn, Catherine carefully got dressed. She moved slowly, testing her body, but the pain didn't return. She went to the barn and found Cole mucking stalls. "What are you doing out of bed?" he demanded. "I'm done being useless," Catherine said. "I feel better. The pain is gone. I'm helping." "Catherine, the doctor said bed rest because he wasn't sure what was wrong. I know my body, Cole. I'm fine now. Maybe it was just, I don't know. But I'm not lying in bed while you work yourself to death." Cole set down the pitchfork, his expression torn between relief and concern. "If something happens to you or the baby because you push too hard, then we'll deal with it. Together." She moved closer, taking his hands. "But I can't watch you destroy yourself trying to protect me. We're partners, remember? For better or worse." He pulled her close, careful of her stomach, and rested his chin on top of her head. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever known. That's why you love me." "One of many reasons," he agreed. They worked side by side that day, Catherine taking frequent breaks and doing only light tasks. By evening, the barn was clean, the horses were fed, and dinner was on the table when the children came in from their chores. That night, lying in Cole's arms, Catherine felt the baby move for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings against her palm. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, guiding Cole's hand to the spot. They lay still, waiting. Then it came again, stronger this time. Cole's face split into a grin. "That's our child," he said, wonder in his voice. "Our child," Catherine repeated. "Stubborn, just like both of us, fighting to survive." But survival required more than stubbornness. As summer arrived and Catherine's pregnancy progressed, it became clear they needed help. The ranch was too much for Cole alone, even with Catherine's assistance. One afternoon, a young man rode up to the house, barely 20, with shaggy blonde hair and nervous energy. He dismounted and approached Cole cautiously. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Danny Cooper. Miguel told me you might need help. I'm looking for work. I'm good with horses, and I'm willing to learn." Cole sized him up. "Experience?" "Worked my family's farm in Kansas until a tornado took it last year. Been drifting since. Miguel said you were fair and paid decent." "I am, but I can't pay what Miguel made. Not until the fall sales." Danny straightened his shoulders. "Room, board, and whatever you can manage for pay. I need a place to belong more than I need money right now." Catherine saw something in the young man's eyes. The same desperate hunger for stability she'd felt when Cole pulled her from the river. She caught her husband's eye and gave a small nod. "All right," Cole said. 2-month trial. You work hard, you're honest, and you learn fast. The job's yours permanent. Deal?" "Deal." Danny's relief was palpable. Danny proved to be a godsend. He worked tirelessly, asked questions when he didn't know something, and never complained. He was good with the children too, teaching James to rope and letting Sarah ride on his shoulders. Within a month, it felt like he'd always been part of the ranch. Catherine's pregnancy progressed, and this time she was careful not to push too hard. But she continued to work, cooking, mending, tending the garden, helping with the lighter ranch tasks. She was determined to contribute, to be the partner Cole needed. In September, as the aspen trees turned gold on the mountains, Catherine went into labor. It started just after dawn, a tightening across her belly that gradually intensified. She was kneading bread when her water broke. "Cole," she called calmly, "it's time." Cole appeared in the doorway, took one look at her, and immediately swung into action. "Danny, ride for Dr. Patterson. James, I take your sister to the Mitchells in town. Catherine, sit down before you fall down." "I'm not going to fall down," Catherine said, but she sat anyway. "This baby has timing. At least it waited until the bread was needed." Cole knelt beside her, taking her hands. "How are you feeling? Nervous, excited, like I'm about to do something terrifying and wonderful?" She squeezed his hands. "Stay with me." Wild horses couldn't drag me away. The labor was long, nearly 12 hours. Dr. Patterson arrived and set up in their bedroom. Cole refused to leave, despite the doctor's suggestions that he wait outside, as most husbands did. "I'm not most husbands," Cole said flatly. "I'm staying." Catherine gripped his hand through the contractions, drawing strength from his presence. He wiped her forehead with cool cloths, helped her breathe through the pain, and whispered encouragement when she was certain she couldn't continue. Finally, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, their daughter was born. She came into the world squalling, red-faced and furious, her tiny fists waving. "She's perfect," Dr. Patterson said, placing the baby on Catherine's chest. "Completely healthy." Catherine looked down at her daughter, at the dark hair plastered to her tiny head, the grey eyes that were unmistakably Cole's, and felt her heart expand impossibly. Cole leaned over them both, one hand touching the baby's head with exquisite gentleness. "What should we name her?" Catherine asked. Cole was quiet for a moment, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Anna," he said softly, "after my mother, if that's all right with you." Catherine understood the significance. Cole rarely spoke of his mother, the pain of losing her still sharp even after so many years. Naming their daughter after her was an honor and a healing. "Anna Brennan," Catherine said, testing the name. "It's perfect." The baby Anna proved to have her father's stubborn will and her mother's determination. She nursed vigorously, slept fitfully, and demanded attention with lusty cries. James was fascinated by his new sister, while Sarah was initially jealous before gradually warming to the baby. 2 weeks after Anna's birth, Catherine was sitting on the porch nursing her daughter when a rider appeared on the horizon. As he drew closer, she recognized Thomas Hartwell. Her body tensed, but she refused to go inside or show fear. Thomas dismounted, his eyes cold as they raked over her and the baby. "Catherine, I heard you'd had another child." "What do you want, Thomas?" "Just wanted to see how you're getting on. Living out here in the wilderness, raising brats, working like a common laborer." His smile was cruel. "Edward would be ashamed of what you've become." Catherine stood, cradling Anna against her chest. Years ago, those words would have wounded her. Now they bounced off harmlessly. "Edward would be proud," she said calmly. "Proud that I survived, proud that I built a good life, proud that I found love again and created a family." She met Thomas's eyes steadily. "You, on the other hand, Edward would be disgusted by what you've become, a bitter, small man who destroys rather than builds." Thomas's face reddened. "You think you're better than—" "I don't think about you at all, Thomas." Catherine's voice was like steel wrapped in silk. "You have no power over me anymore, no claim on my life. You're nothing but a ghost of a past I've left behind." She turned her back on him, the ultimate dismissal, and walked into the house, closing the door firmly. Through the window, she watched him stand there for a long moment before finally mounting his horse and riding away. Cole emerged from the barn, having watched the entire exchange from a distance. He came into the house and found Catherine standing by the window, still holding Anna. "You all right?" he asked. "Better than all right." Catherine turned to him, her eyes bright. "I just realized something. For 7 years, Thomas has been a shadow hanging over us, always waiting for another chance to hurt us, to take what we've built. And I've been afraid of him on some level, even though I tried not to show it. And now I see him for what he really is, pathetic, powerless. He can't hurt us unless we let him, and I'm done letting him." She shifted Anna to one arm and reached for Cole with the other. "We've survived floods and storms, avalanches and near bankruptcy. We've built something real and strong and beautiful. Thomas Hartwell is just noise. He doesn't matter." Cole pulled her close, careful of the baby between them. "You're an extraordinary woman, Catherine Brennan. I'm an ordinary woman who was lucky enough to find an extraordinary partner." She smiled up at him. "We make each other better, Cole. That's what real love does." That evening, with all three children finally asleep, Catherine and Cole sat on their porch in the gathering dusk. The ranch spread before them, barn and corrals, pastures dotted with horses, the vegetable garden Catherine had planted, the new chicken coop Danny had built. It wasn't much by some standards, but it was theirs, built with their own hands, defended with their own courage, filled with their own love. "Do you ever think about that day at the river?" Cole asked suddenly. "What would have happened if I'd been somewhere else, if I hadn't pulled you out?" Catherine leaned against his shoulder. "Sometimes, but not with regret or fear. More like wonder. All the tiny choices that led to that moment. Edward's decision to take that route, the storm that swelled the river, your decision to ride out that morning instead of staying home. Any one of those things changes, and we never meet. Fate," Cole said. "Or luck. Or God's plan. I don't know." Catherine tilted her face up to kiss his jaw. "I just know I'm grateful. For you. For this life. For every hard thing we've faced, because it made us stronger." "Here now," Cole murmured, pulling her closer. "Here now. And always," Catherine completed. "Together." They sat in silence as the stars emerged, two people who had found each other in the midst of drowning and learned to swim. Not perfectly, not easily, but together, always together, in the vast and beautiful wilderness of love. And that, Catherine thought, was the greatest adventure of all. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Catherine and Cole's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.